Okay, let's begin. So firstly, yeah, thanks again, everybody, for joining today's webinar, Content Formulas webinar on AI in the digital workplace. My name's Alex. I'm going to be the host of the webinar today, and I'm also the business development manager here at Content Formula. So if you've got any kind of questions afterwards, I will be your point of contact. But we have a kind of panelist today who's going to take you through a variety of kind of different topics that we're going to be covering around AI. And the general theme with today's webinar is, as I say, covering AI in the workplace. And we're going to go through what AI is and kind of how it sits in the digital workplace currently, how you can use the Microsoft ecosystem to facilitate AI. And we're also going to go through the opportunities that we see with AI in the digital workplace. We're also going to go through what you guys can do right now to get started, actions that you can take internally and externally to start adopting AI. And we're also going to go through how Content Formula specifically can help you get started with AI too. So before we get started, let's do an introduction to our panelist. Joe, do you want to kind of, actually, Dan, I'll tell you what, you kick things off.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. So I'm Dan Hawtrey. I'm the MD of Content Formula. For those of you who don't know, hopefully you all do, but Content Formula is a digital workplace consultancy. We're very well known for building intranets, but we also build lots of other tools, digital workplace tools, mostly on the Microsoft ecosystem. So yeah, that's me. Over to you, Joe.
Cool, thanks, Dan. So yeah, I'm Joe Perry, Head of Technology at Content Formula. It's my responsibility to work with that Microsoft ecosystem, Microsoft 365, Azure, to build solutions for our customers. Today, I'm actually going to run a couple of live demonstrations using AI. So I'm going to talk to you about an enterprise data AI app that will allow you to interact with your data using kind of natural language. You can ask your data questions. I'll kind of show you a demo there. I'm also going to show you a call center demonstration as well, where I'll kind of imagine that I'm a call center agent and show how we can use AI to show insights and recommendations in real time to agents based on kind of them just talking to a person on the phone. So I'm going to try and run a couple of live demos today for us.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Just a few pointers before we get started. We're going to make this session quite interactive. So if you have any kind of comments that you want to make through the webinar, there's a chat section inside of this meeting. So you should be able to post messages inside of there, and I'll be monitoring that, and we can kind of pass on comments as we go through. We also have a Q&A section as well, which you should see at the top inside of the sort of navigation part of Teams. If you want to post a question, either anonymously or unanonymously, you could post your question in there. I'll put a little welcome message in there in a second so you know where to go. But yeah, without further ado, Dan, should we kick things off?
Sure. Thank you very much, Alex. So yeah, welcome everyone. It's good to have you on our webinar today. Let me flick through to the next slide. For some reason, that's not working. It's a good start. Oh, okay. So I was some months ago, actually, not long after OpenAI launched ChatGPT to the world. I was having a chat with an AI consultant that we work with. He's a Bulgarian chap, actually. We've been working with him for a long time. I was saying to him, Milan, I'm a bit concerned about this project because we've never really done anything like this before. It's not unusual if you work in IT that you are coming up against things that you've not done before, technologies that you've not used before. And I think this was kind of what was very much on my mind. However, with AI, I was somehow kind of slightly intimidated by AI, and my friend Milan just said, Dan, I really wouldn't worry about it. He said there's probably only about 30 people in the world who've done what you're trying to do before, and that kind of made me think, actually, there is nothing to be intimidated about with these new technologies. I was thinking back to the dot-com boom, And that was the beginning of the internet age. I think really the beginning of the technology age for many people. You could argue that up until that point we were really quite backward as a civilization, but when people were getting started in the dot-com boom, there were no experts at all. And technology, sort of internet technology, computer technologies were new to many, many people. But now with AI, actually, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of these AI technologies that are available to us are very, very accessible. They're very easy to use. And that's what we want to illustrate to you today, that you mustn't be intimidated by AI. There's a lot of hype about it, that's for sure, but there's no reason to be intimidated about it. And there's every reason to get started with using AI in your organizations, dip your toe in the water. And there's tons of stuff that you can do. And that's what we're going to illustrate to you today. Let's start with a definition of AI. I'm sure most people who are on this call have a fair level of comfort with what AI is, but let's just cover this off just in case there are any who are still asking questions around this. So broadly, we see that there are three types of AI. And the sort of the names and definitions that we give to these, it's all a bit blurry, and you shouldn't get too obsessed about this, too worried about it. But broadly, we see that there's narrow AI or weak AI, which I don't think is a particularly good word, but yeah, narrow AI I think is better. And narrow AI are tools that have a very kind of specific objective, and such as, for example, text to speech is an example of narrow AI, or maybe a tool that is able to identify objects in a photograph. That would be an example of narrow AI. Moving to the right, we've got general AI or strong AI, or in some cases AGI, artificial general intelligence. Again, lines are blurry here, so don't worry too much about it. But general AI, I think broadly a definition would be these are tools that can work on many different tasks. So there are many different types of objectives that these tools can fulfill. And so I think ChatGPT fits quite nicely within this definition of general AI. I wouldn't say ChatGPT's an artificial general intelligence. It's not quite yet kind of human level of intelligence. And in fact, even Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, he concedes that ChatGPT, particularly GPT-4, is not artificial general intelligence. It's not human level intelligence, but it's pretty close. On the right, we've got superhuman AI, and this doesn't really exist yet. This is the realm of science fiction, and the idea there is obviously is an AI, so much more intelligent than humans that it can play, 5D chess at speed and win every time. So it's that kind, we're talking about that sort of intelligence. Let me show you, I want to show you some examples of tools that cover narrow AI. So I'm just going to share my browser window, because there's actually lots of tools already available. And again, one of the things I said at the start is that I want to illustrate to you how a lot of these tools are very, very accessible. So this is the Amazon, the AWS page for AI. So these are all of the different AI services that Amazon offers. So you can see they've got a tool for analyzing images and videos. They can detect defects and automate inspection. They've got tools for extracting text and data from documents, automatic speech recognition, and so on and so forth. There are about 25 different tools here, and they're not quite plug and play, but they're tools that you can plug your application into using APIs, and you can start leveraging these tools really quite easily. So very, very accessible. Let's look at what Microsoft offers in this space. So this is Azure Cognitive Services, and that's the banner under which Microsoft presents all of its AI tools. And if we go down here, we can see there are various ones. So they've got a similar collection to what Amazon have got. They've got speech to text, text to speech, speech translation, speaker recognition, entity recognition, sentiment analysis, and so on and so on. There's quite a few of them that they've got. So these are kind of all examples of narrow AI tools. They're collections that are growing kind of almost by the day, and a lot of them have been around for quite a long time. This one here is the new one. This is the Azure OpenAI service. That is that's based on the same technology as ChatGPT, and we're going to be talking a lot about that technology today. We're going to look at some of the others as well, but we're going to talk about that technology in particular and talk about how you can use it in your own organizations. And the important thing to recognize here is that it's not using ChatGPT. You can go onto ChatGPT today and you can upload sort of, put confidential information or intellectual property into ChatGPT, and that's effectively leaking out into the hands of OpenAI. You don't want to be doing that. This is a service that enables you to have a private ChatGPT inside your organization. In fact, you can do a lot more with it than just create a ChatGPT with it. So let's go back to my slides. 1 second. So thinking about generative AI, I thought it'd be useful to think of what are the core functions that generative AI enables in the digital workplace. And we've come up with 6, and 5 of them are quite well known. The 6th one is perhaps less thought about, and I'm going to talk about that. So obviously answering questions, a tool like ChatGPT is good at Q&A. You can ask it questions about virtually anything, and it will be able to give you a pretty good answer. Drafting new content, if you need it to draft an intranet article or an email, you just give it a brief, and it will do that. It can edit content as well, so you can give something like ChatGPT some ropey copy, sort of hastily written, and it will turn it into nice prose for you. You can also use it for summarizing content and also for classification. So you can give it, generative AI models, a bunch of documents, and ask them to classify or to tag those documents against a taxonomy that you may have. So the 6th one is the one that I think a lot of people haven't really thought about and don't really think about when they're thinking about tools like ChatGPT, and that is advising and consulting. What I mean by that is that you actually turn the large language model into an advisor or a consultant, and it is the one that asks questions of the user in order to then be able to advise them. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to illustrate that to you by showing you this prompt. So this is a prompt I found on the intranet on the web, and it illustrates this kind of consultant role that ChatGPT can play, or that a large language model can play. So I'm going to break it down to you. So firstly, at the top of the prompt, we've got the role. So we set ChatGPT a role. So your cognitive behavioral therapist, your kind and open approach to CBT allows users to confide in you. So very straightforward. We then give ChatGPT an objective. So you only ask questions one at a time, and you collect the user's responses to implement the following steps of CBT, of which there are 2. You help the user identify troubling situations or conditions in their life, and you help the user become aware of their thoughts, emotions, and beliefs about these problems. Finally, we've got an approach. And the approach is really the sort of the methodology, if you like, that ChatGPT needs to use. So we say, using the user's answers to the questions, you identify and categorize negative or inaccurate thinking that is causing the user anguish. And it then lists the different categories of anguish that the user might be having, such as, you know, disqualifying the positive, jumping to conclusions, fortune telling. These are all kind of known things within CBT. And then it says, after identifying and informing the user of the type of negative or inaccurate thinking, you help the user reframe their thoughts through cognitive restructuring. You ask one question at a time, and these are the questions. What evidence do I have to support this thought? What evidence contradicts it? And so on and so forth. And then finally, the last bit of the prompt is a bug fix, and that is that ChatGPT, I don't know whether some of you would notice this, but it has a tendency of kind of going into solution mode and just kind of spilling everything out in one go. And this is really saying, actually, no, just ask one question at a time, and don't forget that you should only ask one question at a time. So let's actually put this into ChatGPT, and I'm going to show you how it works, and kind of point out some interesting things whilst we do that. So let me share my window. Okay, so I'm going to go into ChatGPT. I'm going to find the prompt, which I've lost. Sorry, it's on my screen somewhere. Here it is. And I'm going to paste it in. So I'm going to use, I'm using the paid for version of ChatGPT. So this is GPT-4. So there's our prompt. I've pasted it in. And now let's see what ChatGPT has to say about it. So I've got to point out, ChatGPT is acting quite slowly today. So, but still, here we go. So to start with, please share a troubling situation or condition in your life that you'd like to discuss. Right, I'm going to say, I have a fear of public speaking. Come on, ChatGPT. I told you it was slow. It actually crashed just before the webinar session started, which is very typical. So then you can see, when you think about public speaking, what thoughts or beliefs come to your mind? So my biggest fear is forgetting what I have planned to say. And you'll see that it's now starting to ask those questions, or questions related to those that we put in the prompt. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I just want to point out some of the kind of interesting things that are happening here. So firstly, we've turned things onto its head. Rather than the user asking questions to ChatGPT, it's ChatGPT asking the user questions. So we've completely turned things on their head. So the ChatGPT is acting as an advisor, as a consultant, as a therapist. And what we've effectively created, so we've created a prompt, which is it's effectively a program. So just using natural language, we have programmed ChatGPT. And what it's doing with that program, we're able to give it kind of specific instructions, but we don't have to be explicit about those instructions, because ChatGPT obviously has kind of, you know, whole world knowledge that it can also call upon in order to fulfill those instructions and follow those instructions. So yeah, that's what we mean by ChatGPT as an advisor. And I keep saying ChatGPT. This could be any sort of large language models, not just ChatGPT. Let's go back to my PowerPoint. Apologies for the delay there. So let's, I think, one of the things that we talked about is how you can approach AI and start using AI in your organization. And obviously the key thing is going to be to find like the appropriate use case for you to build an AI tool around. And we think of these in terms of 4 sort of categories of use cases, and we plot them on a graph, and this will give you an idea, depending on what your use case is, what you can expect in terms of like investment spend, skill level, time to deliver, risk, compute power, etc., etc. So this is our y-axis. We also got our 4 categories on here in the middle, and then our use case complexity as we move to the right. So right on the left, we've just using existing off-the-shelf tools such as ChatGPT or Copilot when that's available. So these tools are obviously very accessible. You spend $20, $30 a month per user, and you're away. Perhaps not so interesting. You're more likely to build a competitive advantage if you start doing things a little bit more custom. And these are the types of the next couple of categories are the types of things that we're talking to our clients about. So so the second category, an example would be like a virtual expert or knowledge management tool. And in this case, you'd be using an existing large language model like ChatGPT or GPT-4, I should say, to scan documents or pages. You'd probably build your own user interface as well, so that you have a custom user interface, and you'd also build your own prompts as well. So you'd have super prompts like the prompt that I just showed you, like some more kind of program type prompts. Fairly straightforward, fairly accessible things that you can do there to build tools within that category. Looking into the third category, a good example would be a customer service, automated customer service bot. So if you imagine, customer service where the customer comes to your website and is able to ask a bot questions, and unlike a lot of customer service experiences that we've seen in the past, where actually very quickly you come to a dead end and you need to be handed over to a human, this would be a bot that really is able to give you some good advice. So in this case, you'd need to train an existing model like GPT-4 with proprietary data, and that data would need to be cleaned and probably labeled as well. So in the example of a customer service bot, you'd be using call transcripts from previous calls, probably many hundreds or thousands of them. You'd need to probably clean them and check that the information in those call transcripts was accurate and up to date. You'd need to do a lot of testing and alignment, make sure that it's not handing out incorrect information or dangerous information. And you'd need to perform ongoing monitoring and optimization with such a tool. So there's a lot more stuff to think about. Moving on to the fourth category, we're looking here at a much more sophisticated AI tool, such as, and the example I give here is if you can imagine a medical X-ray diagnostics tool. So this would be a tool where you can just feed it an X-ray of, I don't know, some bones or organs or something like that, and the tool would be able to automatically diagnose the medical problem that's visible on that X-ray. And in order to do something like that, you'd be talking about building a proprietary model from scratch using a large proprietary data set, so a private data set, probably many thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of X-rays with known diagnoses for each of those X-rays. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of significant testing, alignment, monitoring, and optimization. So So yeah, I think the kind of the area where most organisations who are sort of jumping into AI now should be playing is the first and second. It's the second and third category. This is where there's actually lots of low-hanging fruit. And I'm going to show you some examples. So these are examples that we are sort of either working with clients on or talking to clients about. And obviously they're specific to the digital workplace. So one is document generation, and the use case here is, so this is a consultancy, and they've got a lot of documents that they're having to create on a frequent basis. So we're talking proposals, briefs, market analyses, and their starting point is that they have good specimen examples of these documents. Nice kind of best-in-class examples of these documents, and they also have a really good proprietary knowledge base. So this company is pretty good on their knowledge management. And the approach here is for us to create a guided prompt builder. So it's really using the GPT-4 model, but rather than just allowing the user to just ask questions like you can with ChatGPT, it's turned on its head, and it's the model is asking the questions and guiding the user to actually provide the information that it needs so that it can create the document. And in order to do that, we use a really clever combination, which is combining Azure OpenAI service with Azure Cognitive Search. And I'll illustrate a little bit more what that means with my next use case. It'll make a bit more sense. So this next one is a property company. So they have a lot of shops and residential property and office property that they lease, and they have obviously lots and lots of contracts, and their objective is they want to be able to query these contracts and get quick answers to common questions about them. For example, they might want to say, well, the property that we've got on 11 Main Street, what are the special insurance clauses within that contract? And so by using OpenAI and Cognitive Search, we're able to do that. So the Azure Cognitive Search actually goes there, it finds the relevant contract, and it passes it to the Azure OpenAI service, which then reads the contract and pulls out the necessary information related to the user's query. What are the special insurance clauses in this particular example? So this is another use case, and again using that combination of OpenAI and Azure Cognitive Search. So the third one is department knowledge bots. So this is a healthcare company, and they want to be able to answer common questions that users might have as they sort of interact with different departments. And so this is really about their starting points. They've got an existing and structured intranet with sort of department sections. So they've got lots of content about policies and processes, how we work, meet the team, all of this kind of content. And again, we're using that magic combination of Azure OpenAI service with Azure Cognitive Search in order to be able to answer questions to users based on that intranet content. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's going to illustrate with some demos some of the stuff that we've been talking about. So over to you, Joe.
Cool, thanks, Dan. So hopefully you hear me clearly, and I'm going to share my screen for some of these demos because I'm going to run like live demos. One of them, as I mentioned earlier, is around searching enterprise data. The other one is a call center example where I'm going to be kind of the agent and the customer and kind of talk through that journey and show how AI can actually help in that experience in real time. Now, both of these demonstrations, I've actually downloaded the code straight from GitHub. They're code examples that are freely available on GitHub. They are utilizing services inside of Azure. So that, as Dan mentioned, things like cognitive services, OpenAI inside of Azure, they're using those services, and it does cost money to run those services. But yeah, these are available on GitHub, and I'll follow up after this session probably with some links to these libraries, so the people who are more technical on this session can perhaps take a look at some of the different technologies that are at use, the architecture that's behind them. Perhaps I'll touch on that at different points. But the first example is basically an example that shows you how you can interact with your enterprise data. And in this example, I'm going to show you how I can communicate with an employee handbook and policies inside of my organization. Now, as Dan says, we're going to use something called Azure Search here. And Azure Search is actually going to go off and find information that exists in my organization. So that could be policy documents that live as PDFs. It could be PowerPoint presentations. It could be documents that I've kind of fed into my enterprise data platform. And it's going to pass those sources into GPT 3.5 in this example. And so you can see here in this experience, I can actually ask my data some questions. So I can say, what is included in my Northwind Health Plus plan that is not standard? I can say, what happens in a performance review, or what does a project manager do? So I'm just going to click on the first one because it's going to just generate an answer for me here. And it says here, Northwind Health Plus offers coverage for emergency services, mental health and substance abuse coverage. And it actually gives me a citation to a particular document. So it allows me to kind of see, well, this is the plan that I've got, and this is kind of the different plans that are offered. It's pointing me to an actual document that I can go and view. Now, to set this up in the first place, all I had to do was get a set of documents and push it into this service. I haven't had to teach it anything. I haven't had to go through a load of training to kind of make it understand what a Northwind Health Plus plan is and what a health plan document is at all. I've just given it the documents, and OpenAI's GPT is kind of knowing how this kind of comes together and providing me kind of nice looking outputs. So I can say, does this plan cover dental? So I've actually asked it this question this time, and it said, yes, it does. It provides comprehensive cover for medical, vision and dental services, again, giving me a citation to a particular place that I can dive deeper into. I can ask it more questions. What if I leave the company? And again, it's going to come back with, if you leave the company, you may be eligible, you may have to pay for these costs. And again, gives me kind of a document that is kind of deep in their terms and conditions, and it tells me kind of what I can actually do there. So this is an example where I can upload a whole set of enterprise data into this, and I can just ask questions straight away. It's kind of changing how search can work in an organization. Instead of just searching and then looking for that information, I can actually query and start like asking questions of my information. GPT 3.5 is kind of processing that and giving me responses and actually citing me where that information is coming from to kind of back up that I can actually trust what this is telling me. So it's quite a nice example of using natural language to talk to information and using AI to actually bring that information back to me in quite a nice, clear manner. And so I can ask further questions. I can ask things that it understands. If it doesn't understand something, it will tell me it doesn't understand something. If it needs more information, it will say that. So I'll say, how much does this plan cost? And it will come back and tell me the cost of this depends on your plan type, the services you use, the providers you visit. You can find more details about that here. So it gives me quite a nice experience of just talking to enterprise data and giving me nice responses that I'm just like kind of putting in very informal questions. So that's my first example of where I've kind of consumed enterprise data, asking it questions, and it's bringing information back to me. And that uses Azure Search, Cognitive Services, and OpenAI to do that. My second example is I'm going to kind of show you how I could be a call center agent. And I'm going to actually run through a transcript that I've built over the side here. So you can see I've got a bit of a script that I'm going to run through where I'm an agent. I'm saying, hello, you're through to the car insurance claim line. The customer then says what's happened. They've had an accident whereby they've had a crash, and they describe what happens in that crash. And I'm going to show you how the AI, and it's that kind of that weak or that AI, that first stage AI that Dan showed earlier, uses the speech to text to turn the speech when I talk into text. And then I'm going to pass it into OpenAI services to actually do some processing on that, where it will summarize that conversation for me and then provide recommendations to me as a call center agent in real time. So perhaps if I've missed important information out, or if it thinks I should be asking further clarification questions because I've asked something that is fairly open-ended, it will actually kind of make recommendations to me. And so I'm going to try this now. I'm going to click start conversation, and I'm going to start talking from this script that you see on the right, and you'll see it kind of transcribe this in real time. Hello, you are through to the car insurance claim line. Hi, my name is Alex Smith, and I'd like to report an accident that I've had with my car. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. If you could answer as much as possible, that would be great. What is your address? It's 123 Test Road. When did the accident happen? 9th of September 2023. What is the make and model of your car? It's a Ford Fiesta 2018. Please can you describe the nature of the accident? I was driving on the motorway and I had to suddenly brake due to the car ahead stopping quickly. I rear-ended that person. My airbags deployed and have caused a considerable amount of damage to my car. Did your car get recovered at the roadside? Yes, the police were present and arranged for my car to be taken to a local garage. Was anyone hurt in the accident? No, everyone was okay. Were there any other factors that contributed to the accident? There was a lot of rain which caused my braking distance to be increased. Thank you for this information. I'm going to process the claim now. So I'm going to hit end of conversation now. So I've stopped that. I've kind of stopped that from transcribing. You'll see it's kind of stopped there, but it's done a pretty good job at kind of turning my speech to text. And so you can see here, it's pretty much got everything that I said throughout there. Now I'm going to go on to my next stage where I'm actually going to take that information, that transcript, and I'm going to kind of get some insights. I'm going to ask for a summary of the call, and I'm going to ask for recommendations. And those recommendations, I'm actually going to say, can you provide me 5 recommendations on the possible questions that agents should ask the customer to collect more information? So you see here, it's come back and it said the customer, Alex Smith, called to report an accident happened on the 9th of September. They're driving a Ford Fiesta 2018 on the motorway when they suddenly had to stop quickly. The airbags deployed, causing damage to the car. The police were present. No one was hurt in the accident. A lot of rain caused this. The customer's address is this. And so the recommendations that the AI has actually come back to me and said that I should actually ask the customer if they have any photos of the accident and the damage to the car. I should also ask the customer if there's any eyewitnesses who saw the accident and whether there's any medical conditions that may have contributed to the accident. I should ask the customer if they've had any previous accidents or claims and if there's been any modifications to the car that may have contributed to the accident. So there, in near real time, I've kind of had that conversation with the customer. I sent a prompt to OpenAI's GPT, and it's come back and said, right, you should actually follow up with these questions. Now, in reality, this could be used in a number of scenarios. It could be used in business development. Perhaps I'm having a conversation with a customer and they're talking about various technologies and solutions. I could send that live transcript to OpenAI and it could come back and in real time say, yeah, you should ask the customer about this technology, or you should ask them about this process, whether they're using that. And it can actually make recommendations kind of in real time around any number of different scenarios. What's also great about this is that I've got a secondary prompt down here that allows me to take this whole conversation and turn it into kind of machine readable code that I could then process into some form of database and then create analytics into kind of like finding trends, why certain accidents are happening, or get basically insights into how my agents are performing. So you see here, it's got an example output. The reason is a car accident. The accident location probably isn't right in this time because I've not given it enough information there. The weather was rain, the airbag deployed, the police were called. it gives me how it happened. So I can actually go away and use various reporting tools such as Power BI to create kind of some really nice comprehensive reporting on this kind of call center transcripts and call center conversations. What's also nice is that I could actually use all of that information to then teach my model going forward. So when I'm sending this information off to GPT, it can use all of the previous knowledge and learnings that it's had from other customer situations and apply that to my conversations and to my my insights here. So that's another example of how we can use AI. We're using a couple of forms of AI. We're using that kind of speech to text side. We're using GPT to then make those recommendations, but doing it all in real time so that an agent can kind of have the most information and kind of be given those recommendations just straight away.
Joe, we've had a couple of questions, and thanks for showing those demonstrations. They're really, really useful. What's the typical amount of time that it would take? This is from Zach, by the way, that someone would get from configuring this and then kind of getting this end user experience.
Yeah, so I mean, I've just picked this up from GitHub. This is just a run-of-the-mill GitHub library. I haven't provided this any training. I'm just using GPT 3.5 here and what it understands about car insurance claims. Like, I've given it no training. So it kind of depends on the scenario. If you're talking about something that's very niche that GPT may not understand, it may require more training. But if you're talking about car accidents that GPT clearly has a pretty good understanding of, the training requirement there is less. The interface itself, this is pretty much a website. It's just a website that an agent goes to. We'd obviously need to hook in some way for the audio to be fed into this application. I've obviously just got my single microphone going into this, but yeah, in this world of audio, it's pretty straightforward to do all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it's very possible to do that stuff. It just depends on how niche the kind of the scenario is.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And the other question is actually a question from me was around where does the data and the information that's being fed into this that comes from the enterprise, where does that kind of get stored? So in the first example, for example, you kind of showed documents being shown, and there's a kind of a relationship there between ChatGPT and Azure. So I can imagine organizations being conscious that data might be shared outside of Azure. So kind of, yeah, where does that information go and what's the protection there?
So the documents themselves here, they're actually stored inside of many places. They can be stored inside of SharePoint. They can be stored inside of OneDrive. They can be stored inside of Microsoft Teams, which ultimately is SharePoint. They could be stored inside of Azure. So they could be on the cloud inside of Azure. Now, when it's actually talking to OpenAI, we're talking to the Azure OpenAI instance that Dan described earlier, not the OpenAI that everyone has access to through ChatGPT. It's a corporate platform that locks it down to just kind of your information. It's not sharing it outside of your borders. It keeps it there where you want it to be.
Cool. Thanks, Joe.
No worries. Dan, I'll hand back to you now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Joe. That's really interesting examples. And hopefully everyone, you can see that although Joe showed, especially in the second example, he showed us a use case where we're using this for, in the scenario of an insurance company and a claims agent. Actually, you could use a very similar model or that same model in many different scenarios, whether it's something like, I don't know, perhaps, interviewing employment candidates, for example, for a job role, and anything like that. There are lots and lots of different use cases. You could use that technology or something very, very similar to it, and you could also attach it to a process using something like Power Automate, so that maybe you've got Power Automate, which would then kind of join that data that's pulled from that call and kick off an automated process to carry things forward. So yeah, let me share my screen again. I'll go back to my slides. So we've talked about sort of the art of the possible, and I thought it would be interesting just to kind of step back a bit and just think about some of the housekeeping that you should be thinking about if you're getting started with AI, or particularly generative AI, in your organization. And McKinsey published a CEO's Guide to AI. It was about a month ago or something like that, and I kind of read through it, and I pulled out the sort of the CEO's Guide to Getting Started with Generative AI. So this is just a quick summary, but I thought these were good points that you need to follow. So the first one is you want to build a cross-functional team within your organization to identify the high-value use cases, also to identify the proprietary data that is, that you're going to be able to utilize in any AI tool. So some of the examples we've talked about today, it was like the property company that have all of their contracts. That's their proprietary data. But yeah, the real value with using these tools and how you're going to build a competitive advantage is by using proprietary data, not just using the kind of the whole world data that is already held within the large language models. Finally, you need to think about risks as well. And I'm going to talk about risks in my next slide. But yeah, that would be the sort of the role of the cross-functional team to identify all of these things and then report back to senior leaders. As a second point, it makes sense to start thinking about AI education and training. So we've spoken to different companies who've kind of done different stuff, but holding AI discovery workshops at team or department levels is a typical example. At Content Formula, we've been for quite a while now. We've been having AI Mondays. So every Monday morning, somebody comes and presents something that they've learned about AI. It could be like a tool that they found, or yeah, just something that they've learned, and they present that back to the team. So that's just another way that you can start to get people kind of more educated and aware of the power of AI. Then evaluating your in-house technical capabilities and resources. So this is looking at your skills that you've got in your team, the infrastructure that you've got available, your access to different models as well via that infrastructure, whether it's Amazon models and Amazon tools, or whether it's Azure or whatever. Then it's about evaluating your data preparedness. So is your data in a good state? Is it clean? Is it are you able to start working with it right away, or does it need to be cleaned up and processed in some way? Then we've got thinking about the low-hanging fruit pilots. It makes sense to start, to walk before you can run. Find those easy projects that you can get up and running with, and start to understand how these technologies work. So proof of concepts and minimum viable products. These sorts of outputs are going to be good, and obviously a fast delivery timeline. Another one which probably companies don't necessarily think about is thinking about AI policies, or at least thinking about AI in the context of existing policies. So if you've got an information security policy, probably having something in there around how employees can use tools like ChatGPT, what they can and can't do. That's actually something that you should probably put into your training and education as well. The classic thing is you don't want people uploading proprietary information to the public version of ChatGPT. And then familiarize yourself with AI legislation as well, because we're going to see legislation coming down the road. The EU have, for example, they've already published an AI draft framework, and it's quite good to take a look at these types of things, just to see what's likely to hit us down the road. What are the different areas that are going to affect our endeavors with AI. I said I was going to talk about risks as well. This is a really important area. And there are kind of seven kind of main AI risks. One is to do with fairness and bias. So if you're using AI for decision making, such as maybe scanning CVs or something like that, then you want to make sure that you have controls in place to ensure fairness, so that you don't get pulled up to a tribunal for exhibiting some sort of bias, something like that. Then there's IP. So yeah, I mean, and the IP risk is really a two-pronged risk. There's the risk that your own IP could be stolen, or maybe if stolen's not the right word, it could kind of sort of leak out into outputs that an AI generates unbeknownst to you. But it could also happen the other way around. So you could be using an AI tool and inadvertently plagiarize someone, or inadvertently utilize somebody else's IP. So that's something that needs to be thought about. Privacy and confidentiality. In a digital workplace context, you can imagine, if you let a tool gave it access to a bunch of documents, and those documents contain, say, data about employees, then you wouldn't necessarily want that, or you probably wouldn't want that data sort of leaking out to other employees. So you need to think about those factors too. There's security. Security is quite a big area. I think an obvious one is really just thinking of the threat of the threats that we're likely to see as a result of AI. So it's going to become very much easier to scam people in a much more believable way using AI tools. So preparing our employees, preparing ourselves for those kinds of risks. Then there's explainability. So this is the AI that has, you've asked it a question, it's come up with an answer or a decision perhaps, and you're not really able to explain why that's the right decision. So that's another risk. And I think that the tools that we're seeing, like ChatGPT, are kind of getting smarter like that as well, with that example that Joe showed us, where it actually even shows you that it refers to the document where it got its answer. So we are kind of getting solutions to this risk, but it's still worth thinking about. Then there's reliability and accuracy. We've all heard about ChatGPT's famous hallucinations. It makes stuff up. It makes up references and things like that. So it's worth thinking about that. And then obviously there's the cultural and social impact. And this is all about, if you're starting to use AI inside your own organization, that's probably at first isn't going to sort of worry people too much, but as you go further and further down the AI journey and start implementing more and more AI, then we start to get ethical questions about, is it right to use computers to replace humans, and what are going to be the impacts on people's jobs and their lives? So there's all of that to think about as well. So yeah, those are the sort of the 7 main AI risks. And at that point, we're going to hand over to you guys if you've got any questions that we can answer. We've got about 5 minutes left. We can run over a little bit as well if required. But yeah, please ask your questions in the chat.
Dan, we've had one from Peter that says, you mentioned earlier on in the CEO's guide about evaluate proprietary data preparedness. And Peter's asking, how does the ideal proprietary data set look?
Well, that's a difficult question. I guess certainly with the clients that we've talked to about, how we use their proprietary data, what some of the things that we've seen, which is good about that data, is that it's well organized. It's So one of the clients that we're talking to have, they're big on knowledge management. So their knowledge is really, their sort of proprietary knowledge is really well organized. It's been curated. It's been redacted as well, so they've actually taken out confidential information. They've cleaned it up. So in that example, I think that's what good would look like. I think it probably, it depends on what the data set is before you determine what's the right level of preparedness that you need for that particular data set.
Great, thanks, Dan. We've had a comment from Zach as well, who says that really good list of and summary of risks, and said that the last one that you mentioned before, that you mentioned there, can't be understated. And I think that was around culture specifically. And I'll probably just refer back to what you mentioned, Dan, as something that we've done at Content Formula, which is the AI Monday activity. And I think that was a really interesting approach to us kind of adopting the concept of AI and the fact that it's around, and kind of really embracing it, and us on our own going away and investigating it and seeing how we could put that into practicality in our daily work, but also how it can help our clients as well. So I think that's a really kind of strong way that I know that we've kind of applied, something we've applied to embrace that into the culture.
Yeah, it makes me think of something I've seen a few times on the web, and that is, it's not going to be AI that steals your job. It's going to be somebody who knows how to use AI really, really well. And that's the thing to remember, is that there are some people who are already, they've already built ChatGPT into their workflow. And they've become, very much more productive as a result. So it's about kind of helping employees, helping staff understand those types of things, and really kind of consider AI, certainly in these early stages, it's very much their friend.
Absolutely. And we've actually had another follow-up from Peter about about data sets, which is it possible to use AI on smaller data sets, for example, hundreds of documents?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and yes, it is. It is, because what you can do. So again, I'm going to just use GPT as an example, but you can actually tell the model, this is what good looks like. Please output something like this, and you give it some specimen examples. So yeah, that's not, strictly speaking, that's not training. That's not training the tool. Training the tool is where you need many more examples or not examples, but much more data. But yeah, you can get some really good results by doing that, by pointing the tool to specific examples and building prompts that utilize those specimen examples in order to get the desired output.
I think that kind of touches on another follow-up question that Peter had, which was, are the outputs reliable? So I think you've kind of answered it there, but is there anything else you'd add on that?
Yeah, you need to test it. I think you need to any kind of tool that you build, you obviously you got to have your fingers crossed that the outputs are going to be good, and are going to be accurate and reliable. That's why I think proof of concepts are extremely useful, so that you can just play around with these tools. And before you invest a ton of money in building a super slick tool with a beautiful interface and all of these things, just make sure that the model is able to just churn out accurate and reliable outputs.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Well, we've kind of gone a little bit over time, and I think we should probably call it a day there. But just to kind of just point out, well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining. But just to point out, and Hannah's posted some posts in the chat. We've got some content on our website on AI, and feel free to kind of visit the website and go through those. We'll also post them inside of this chat and inside the follow-up, which we'll be doing after the webinar. And there's some various kind of different articles on there on AI services and what is Azure OpenAI and how it can help your organization. So if you fancy reading those afterwards, please feel free to go to our website and see those. We'll also, as mentioned in the chat, if you saw, we'll follow up with a recording of this webinar so you can share it internally with your organizations. And yeah, if it's useful for any of your colleagues, please feel free to do that. Joe, Dan, anything else you guys want to add before we conclude?
No, I mean, just finally, do come and talk to us about your AI project and how we can help you with that. We'd be really delighted to help out, and yeah, do come to us.
Absolutely. All right then, guys. Well, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for attending. We hope you found it useful, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.